where we're at in the course. All right, so you see in Brightspace under announcements, I think it's posted twice, but there is a Word document that says Exam 1 Review 2016. So we're going to use that to frame our review. I posted that this weekend. I can't remember what day, but sometime this weekend. So this document, okay, says that our exam will be Wednesday. It's a 50-minute exam, so you should be able to do it during the class period. It's going to be worth 100 points. There'll be 35 multiple choice. Some of them will be very similar to the ones you saw on the Chapter 1 and 2 quizzes, so if you did those should be good preparation. Some things that I go over in class are things that aren't in the book, and those quizzes that are book quizzes, okay? So there'll be additional things that I add to the class that will be testing the multiple choice. There'll be 4 short answers at 7.5 points each, so that's 30 points. 1 potential bonus point. It is not open book. It is not open laptop. No cheat sheet or anything like that. You know, this is kind of a survey course. This is an MIS102 course. So a lot of this course is you understanding like concepts and vocabulary, and those things need to come to mind, you know, right away. You can't be looking them up. Like if this is a deeper course, I'd say, yeah, bring in any resources you want. But these are things that I want you to be familiar with without relying on notes. So what I'd like to do today, and you guys can ask any questions that you might have about any of this throughout, but all I really want to do today is review. Okay, so any questions on the format of the exam at this point? So the multiple choice will be like on a Scantron, so bring a pencil if you can, and the short answers will be short answers. Sean, what's that? Wednesday. That's the most important question. Okay, so Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. in this room, okay? So prepare for Wednesday morning. All right, so Chapter 1 especially, I added a lot to Chapter 1, okay? So the study material for Chapter 1 is Chapter 1 of your text, so read that. The YouTube lecture captures, if there's anything, I recorded all of our lectures for this whole thing, so that's a possibility. Chapter 1 PowerPoint slides, classroom lecture. And the one thing that we have is your own notes, but remember we collaborated on a set of notes for chapters 1 and 2, and that's available to you on Google Drive or Google Docs. So, utilize those, because maybe a student filled in some gaps that you had in your notes. So you maybe missed a class, whatever it might be. So hopefully we collaborated on one document that's better. So the topics, okay, the topics. Now this is not in the book, but we talked about the definition of MIS. And we kind of took every letter in that acronym and defined what that was. We said management is, planning, organizing, leading, forecasting, controlling. Those are all kind of verbs we use with management. We said information is data that has been put in a certain format so it can be useful. Raw facts that have been transformed into information. We said information becomes knowledge, and knowledge is power. Remember we talked about the knowledge cycle. Yes, data becomes information becomes knowledge is power. And we talk about systems. The definition we use for systems is an interrelated set of components working together for some purpose. And then later, we kind of saw what those components were. Okay, so there's a lot of different systems, digestive systems, maybe your team goes according to some system. But when we talk about information systems, we're talking about systems, comprised to produce information. So managers can do all those things that we discussed. We did a little exercise on this. We talked about the general system components. So this is not just for this class, but any class that you have or any kind of situation. It's sometimes good to think about situations as a system. Break it down into its parts. And it makes it more understandable, makes us easier to change things. But every system, I don't care what kind of system it is, it has a purpose, right? That's the reason the system exists. It has a purpose, or we wouldn't need the system. There's a reason it exists. Every system has inputs and outputs. Inputs are what comes into the system, outputs are what transforms the system, or what comes out of the system. If we have a system with inputs but no outputs. What do we call that system? I don't know if you remember this term. Has inputs but no outputs. This happens, go ahead. It's called a black hole. And if we have a system with outputs and no inputs, and those are things that really shouldn't happen. Outputs and no inputs, we call it a miracle, right? So those are, when you have that kind of situation, you're saying, well, geez, I'm analyzing my system incorrectly. And boundary and environment are kind of together because the boundary defines the environment. The boundary says there are things in every system that can affect the system that aren't really the system but can affect the system. You know, the federal government can change laws. It can be a new standard that comes out. You know, competition can affect the system. So, you know, boundary and environment kind of the same, you know, kind of define the same thing. This was also not in the book, but we talked about 6 functions every information system does. And now we're talking specifically about information systems. And when we talked about this, we usually pointed to the hardware that did this in an information system. So we said every information system has to capture data or capture information. How does an information system capture data or information? Give you one example. Right now, this crowd is capturing information how? With keyboard, right? Right now, we're capturing audio with that microphone. You know, we're capturing, so there's the mouse captures things, card readers capture things, right? Every information system, you know, their swipe card captures information, right? So how do we capture information in an information system? Usually they transmit. You know, maybe it's long distance. Maybe we're transmitting information across the nation or across the world, or we're just transmitting it from the keyboard to the central processor. But there's also transmissions going on, right? So when we think about transmitting, we think about like networking technology. We want to store and retrieve information. Usually it's the same device. We store it on a hard drive, retrieve it from the hard drive. We store it on optical disk, we retrieve it from optical disk. We store it on paper, we read the paper, right? Those are functions, those are things that allow us to do that with information systems. Manipulate is how we change the information, and then display is how we display it. Monitor, paper, whatever it might be, a 3D printed version is a display from an information system. So I want you to understand those 6 functions. That was kind of all the things that I added to that chapter, the beginning, the kind of the front matter. And then we got into the book stuff, chapter 1 stuff. And this is, we use this component framework all throughout it. You guys are going to use it for your article presentations. We talked about the 5 component framework, and there's a lot of questions related to this on the multiple choice. So if you know no other thing from this whole exam, know the 5 component framework, and we'll talk about it a little bit. So when we talk about the 5 component framework, you know, we have these 5 items: hardware, software, data, procedures, and people, right? So we talk about the 5 component framework. Hardware, obviously, physical devices, software, instructions like manipulate, that tells the hardware what to do. Data is kind of the bridge between the computer side and the human side. Procedures tell the people what to do, and the people are the people. So a couple of things. Why is this symmetrical? Why is this 5-component framework have a beautiful symmetry to it? Why? What's the symmetry that happens up here? Any idea? What's the symmetry? Why are procedures and software similar? Katie? Okay. Okay. So if you think about it, the things that are actually doing something, you know, is the hardware and the people, right? Those are the objects, right? Those are the things that are actually doing actions. And if you think about it, the software and the procedures are really just instructions for those 2 things. You know, the software tells the hardware what to do. You know, operating system software says, show this on the screen. If they click here, do this, right? Software is instructions for the hardware, and procedures are instructions for the people, right? tells the people what to do. The data is kind of the bridge that holds it all together, right? It's the bridge. Now, when we go through the process of automation, what are we trying to do? Automation is a term that and we talk about. Automate a process. What are we trying to do related to the 5-component framework when we try to automate something? What are we doing, Kyle?
Moving the work from like the human side to the computer side.
Yeah, we're saying, you know what, let's move it from the human side to the computer side. That's called automation, yes? And as we talked about automation, you know, we talked about, and this was not in the book, but I thought it was important, we talked about self-service work systems, right? Where we move, you know, from the customer end, you know, so we don't need an employee, we move from work with information systems to the customer, right? So we don't need an employee. We said, let's make it a self-service work system. Give me an example of a self-service work system. It's a automation technique. Yes?
Self-checkout.
Sure. Self-checkout at the grocery store. Pay at the pump, right? You pump your own gas. If you do any betting, instead of going up to the window, you can use a little kiosk there. ATM machine, right? All those things are examples of self-service work systems. And truthfully, anytime you order something online, it's kind of a self-service work system. Think about it. You're checking yourself out. You're putting in your credit card number, right? You're saying, this is the item I want to buy. You're doing the role of the clerk. And hell, sometimes you're downloading something, so you're doing everything, even the fulfillment piece, right? So self-service work systems. We talked about pros and cons of those. Obviously, it will reduce employee costs because we're having the customer serve themselves. The customer sometimes likes that because you don't have to small talk. But you might lose touch with the customer because you're not seeing them in that role. What is the hardest to change of the 5-component framework? What is the hardest thing to change, and what is the easiest thing to change? Kyle?
The first thing to change would be the people, and the easiest thing is the budget.
Very good. So difficulty to change increases as we go to the human side, right? This is the easiest to change. If my mouse breaks, I buy a new mouse, I slap it in there, right? If my printer breaks, no big deal, buy a new printer, connect it, yes? But people are hard to change, right? Especially groups of people when we're in an organization. And I think I used this term, and if I didn't, I'm going to use it now. I talked about something called organizational inertia. What is organizational inertia? What is organizational inertia? Does anyone remember? What is inertia? Oh, you guys, maybe you're physics lovers. What is inertia? Yes, Daniel.
Companies that resist change.
Sure. So inertia means objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. And organizational inertia is the tendency for organizations and people within those organizations to want to do the same damn thing they've been doing, right? And the worst thing I ask people here is, you know, that's the way I've always done it, right? So you've heard that? We do it this way and it works just fine. Organizational inertia is something that IT folks and systems analysts have to always work against. So big thing we talk about overcoming that is the procedures. It's something called training, right? Training people to use the new system, having them understand why we use the new system. So that is, you know, that 5-component framework. There's a lot of things there. Okay, there's a lot of things there. Any questions on that 5-component framework? Okay, so we talked about low-tech versus high-tech automation. You know, one of the things we talked about when we talked about automation is tasks that computers are good at and tasks that humans are good at. What's some examples of that? Because that might come up on the multiple choice or the short answers. Tasks that computers are good at, tasks that humans are good at. Why? So repetitive, structured actions. Who's better at that? Computers. Fast processing, computing, computers. Tasks that require judgment, compassion, looking at things through different lenses, those are all geared toward us, right? Humans, okay? Computers are getting better at all those things, okay? Better at all those things. We didn't really, I think we kind of skipped this section because I don't remember talking about this year in this class. Characteristics of information. Did we talk about that? Of good information? I don't think we did in class. Characteristics of good information. It's in your book, and it's probably on your chapter 1 kit quiz. So we're talking about information systems, and information is obviously the key to that. And information, characteristics of good information is it has to be accurate, meaning it has to be correct. It has to be timely, meaning you have to have it when the decision needs to be made, right? Information is perfect sometimes afterwards, but we need it now because we need to make the decision. We're forecasting for, spring 2017 now. We need that information now. It needs to be relevant, meaning it needs to be toward the task I'm looking for. I don't care about where students come from. That's information. That's good information. It's accurate. It's timely. But maybe I'm trying to decide what classes we offer in the spring. It's not relative to what I'm trying to do. It doesn't matter if you're from Jersey or Pennsylvania. You all need staff to go to it, right? So is it relevant? And these last two are probably the ones that bear the most time spending on. It's just barely sufficient. What does that mean? What does that mean with information? We want information that's just barely sufficient. What does that mean? Because I'm trying to make a decision off this information. What does that mean? Just barely sufficient.
I think the way that I understood it is that we get so much information thrown at us, there has to be just enough information for us to make the decision so that you're not wasting time on a whole bunch of information.
So one of the things we suffer from in this day and age is something called information overload, right? We're constantly bombarded with information, like social media, signs, everything, your smartphone. So just barely sufficient means, sometimes we can provide you information on every aspect of the university, every aspect of the students, but we want information to be provided just barely sufficient for the task, right? And sometimes when we talk about information reports, we use these terms: fine, too fine, and too coarse. Okay, too fine and too coarse. Too fine means, if I'm the regional manager of Walmart, and someone gives me every sales transaction that happened in any Walmart in our region on a given day, and I'm trying to plan our produce budget. That's too fine. It's too much information, right? It's every detail. Too coarse is someone just gives me our total sales for the last 5 years, but I'm really trying to produce just the produce budget for the next quarter, right? Too coarse too fine means it's too granular. Too coarse means it's too big of a value. So just barely sufficient means, we need a happy medium there. We need it just so we can make that decision that we want. And finally, the last one is worth its cost. It takes money and time to produce information. So we don't want to just produce information for the sake that we can do it. It has to be producing information so that the decision that we make based on that is worth more than the time it took to produce that information. Okay? So it has to be worth its cost. Does this make sense? So these are the characteristics of good information. What's the difference between information systems and information technology? Information systems and information technology. What was the difference? We use those terms pretty synonymously, but we really should not. What's the difference between information technology and information systems? Taylor.
Sorry, information systems is like information technology plus the classification.
Right. Okay, so information technology, if you will, talks about like the standards, like GPS is an information technology, right? Networking, Wi-Fi is a technology. A computer chip is a technology. So it's standards and hardware. Information systems takes that technology and applies it with procedures and people, right? So information systems kind of encompasses technology, right? So technology is great, but information systems, which we're really interested in studying here, is taking that technology and applying it for some business purpose. That's what information systems is all about. We already talked about self-service work systems. I'm not sure we talked about push versus pull systems, but let's just X out of that. We're not going to talk about, we're not going to be testing on that. Hard data versus soft data. This kind of relates to our information discussion because I don't think we talked about that either. Hard data versus soft data. What's hard data versus soft data? What's hard data versus soft data? As a manager, you're going to be presented with hard data and soft data. What's the difference? What do you mean? What do I mean by that? If someone says, I want the hard data. What does that mean versus soft data? Because managers, you as a business professional will have to analyze both. How about if I'm evaluating you as a student, as an academic? If I write a reference letter for Taylor in a couple of years, I can use hard data and soft data. What's the hard data I'll use about Taylor? Yes, Katie? Right. Information systems are very good at generating hard data like grade point average, the classes she took, how many years she was here, what her major was. Information systems are very good at generating hard data, right? That's what we call hard data because it can come out on a hard copy. That's probably where it comes from. How about soft data? What is soft data? Yes?
Kind of like your own evaluation of it?
Yeah, she was friendly, she was personable, she got along well with her peers, she always sat in the front of the class, I enjoyed working, those kind of things, right? So if you think about it, a manager, for example, me, I have to manage faculty in school business, right? I do the reviews. And those reviews, there's hard data and soft data involved. They're idea evaluations, They're idea evaluations. If they're good, that's a good thing. If they're bad, that's a bad thing. That's hard data. But there's also soft data, like they're very collegial, and I think they're fair with students, and I think they're open to students. That's soft data, right? So managers have to use both of those sources of information. Good. Trends in information systems, we just kind of talked about that. Data information knowledge, we talked about that. We talked about tasks already. There's some laws in chapter 1. We really only talked about 2 laws. We talked about Moore's law. What was Moore's law? And you guys actually, some of you guys in your article presentation referenced Moore's law, which I was so happy to see. What is Moore's law? Kyle?
The number of transistors on a processor grows exponentially.
Right, it doubles like every 18 months, but the law itself is kind of boring. But what does it mean? What is it caused in the information technology, information systems world that, unlike any other industry, what does it cause? What happens? Because of that, Eric?
Everything's getting smaller, but it's more powerful.
Smaller, cheaper, and more powerful, right? The amount of performance you can buy now is so much, right? Like I think about it, Eric told me he has a 4 terabyte hard drive, right? Eric, is that what you told me? 4 terabytes, okay? You mind if I ask how much you paid for that hard drive?
I think it's $130.
Okay, $130. 4 terabytes of data. We're not talking about data yet, but that is a massive amount of data. I was a computer programmer when I first started my first job 25 years ago. There was 30 of us that worked together. We shared 20 megabytes of data. So, megabytes, 1,000 times more is gigabytes. 1,000 times more than that is terabytes. So think about that scale, right? That's crazy scale. Moore's law, right? That's Moore's law. Pong versus PS, whatever the hell you guys have now, 5, That's Moore's law in action, yes? The TV that I grew up with versus flat screen TVs at Walmart that are awesome for $83, right? That's Moore's law. That's how it transforms your life, but also transforms business. How about Metcalfe's law? We talked less about Metcalfe's law, but what's Metcalfe's law? We see this a lot too because of interconnectivity between things. What's Metcalfe's law? Do you remember?
What's the something about discs multiplied by exponential rate of yourself? Something like on CDs, like silver screens.
No. This one had to do with like the power of networks, the usefulness of networking. Okay, so and it's applicable to a lot of things. The usefulness of a network is n squared, meaning every additional person I add to it makes the network exponentially better. Like if me and Kyle are two people on some kind of, like say it's Miko and Kyle on Facebook, right? On some social network. I know what Kyle's doing and Kyle knows what I'm doing, right? We add Will to it, right? Oh, now it gets a little bit better, but then we add Ricardo to it, and then as we add people, wow, it's not just it goes up by linear, it goes up exponentially, the usefulness of it, right? Like if you think about a site like eBay, if eBay were 10, 15 people, limited viability, right? Limited usefulness. But it's so many buyers, so many sellers that it's the world's perfect market, right? Okay, so the usefulness of a network is exponential with the number of users on that network. So that was Metcalfe's law. So that kind of concludes chapter 1. Okay, we spent a lot of time in chapter 1 because it's foundational, it's important. I added some things to it. What questions might you have on chapter 1? Okay. So chapter 2, we spent less time on chapter 2, but still more time than on chapter 3. And we talked about chapter 2 and the same sources of information. We talked about collaboration versus cooperation. And we're talking about collaboration information systems. So what was the determining factor? What was the difference between cooperation and collaboration? Katie?
Collaboration has feedback.
Okay, very good. Those two things define the difference. Cooperation, hey, we can work together on something. But collaborate means we're going to have multiple iterations, multiple drafts, and feedback. Feedback is going to support that, right? Draft 1, Katie didn't quite like the way I had this design, so I changed it. And then Katie was happy with this, and then maybe Catano had a suggestion, so we have another iteration. Collaboration is what we want to do in the business world in most cases. We talked about various forms of collaboration information systems, and one of the things that defined how we broke those two things out was by synchronous versus asynchronous. Synchronous versus asynchronous. What's the difference? How about right now, me talking to you at the same place, same time? This is what kind of communication? This is synchronous. Asynchronous is this. I record it, you watch it later, that's asynchronous. So different time is asynchronous. We talked about tools that are synchronous versus asynchronous, collaboration tools, and some that are synchronous that can be asynchronous as well. Like this lecture, because I record it, can be asynchronous, right? We talked about different types of communication systems, including their advantages and disadvantages. We specifically spent a lot of time on email, because that's still, I know it's like old school, but there's still a fundamental communication information system in the world of business. It's still, one of the standards, along with now text and some other tools. We use Google Docs and spreadsheets / Google Drive kind of as an example of a collaboration information system. And as we did that, we talked about the advantages of a cloud-based system, right? One version, easily collaborate on that. We collaborate on some things because it's better to do than just talk about things. So there could be some multiple choice about Google Docs and spreadsheets. Just some things, because we used it in this class, it could be there. We talked about content management levels. That was one of the last things we talked about in chapter 2. And we talked about no control. When we talk about content management, no control, content management is how we manage content and the different versions of content. So what is no control in a content management? Give me an example of no control for content management. Give me an example of when I'm using no control for the content. Yeah, if I email you guys, all 30 of you guys, a document, boom, now I have 30 versions of that document and I have no control over that, yes? So we said there's different levels. For example, Google Drive, which we use, has version management where it's one version. We can see all the reversion history, all those good things. And then we talked about a higher level like SharePoint, which has authorization and authentication. So does Google Drive. But it also had workflow. Remember workflow? We talked about sequential versus parallel workflow. So that was something that we talked about. I can get together here. Document checkout, like a library. So these things, the level of these, if they're higher, kind of go with version control. Okay, version management is kind of like an in-between. The gold standard is things like SharePoint, which we don't have access to Microsoft. We talked about the usefulness of information, collaboration information systems in the business world, and we talked about the lowest level is they're used to become informed. Then, if we're informed, we can make decisions. We make decisions, and we know something, we can solve problems. If we do all those three things, we can manage projects. And then we specifically talked about decision making. We talked about 3 levels of decision making in the business world: operational, managerial, and strategic. Which one is long-term planning? Like, we're going to merge with Mount Aloysius. God no, but what if we made that? What level would that be of that decision? That would be a strategic. If I said we're going to offer STAP 302 next semester at 9:30 and 11 o'clock. What would you say that is?
Managerial.
That's more managerial, right? I'm deciding, and John Miko's going to teach it. I'm deciding how to use our resources, kind of a little longer term plan. How about I say, operational decision. I'm going to give a test today, or I'm going to take attendance today. I didn't take attendance today, but whatever. That's operational. Day-to-day stuff is operational. So what level do we need more collaboration? Collaboration information systems are needed more at what level? Strategic, right? We need to bring a lot of stakeholders, get their input. Maybe students, maybe maybe our board of directors need involved. So collaboration information systems, and you'll find in a business organization, the higher the person, typically the more time they spend communicating, right? If you're the CEO of a company, probably 99.5% of your time is spent collaborating and communicating, yes? So the higher you go in an organization, the more time you spend communicating. That's why, even though I teach computer stuff and math stuff, stats, the most important skill for you to move up the chain in the business world by far is communication skills and working with people. So that was kind of chapter 2. Any questions on chapter 2? And then finally, chapter 3, which we did this kind of quickly because we're not even doing a quiz on chapter 3, but there are some nuggets in there that I want to pull out. These are more business terms than IS terms, but we kind of related that. We talked about Porter's 5 forces. We also talked about his 4 generic strategies, and really it's 3 strategies. It's cost, you can compete on cost, compete on differentiation, and compete on focus, like a certain market. And inside of focus, we can either compete in cost or differentiation. So it's really 3 generic strategies that become 4 because the focus can be either of those 2. And where we talked about this is how information systems can create competitive advantage in products and business processes. We talked about creating new products, enhancing products, reducing costs. So those are all options for us. Okay, so the multiple choice, as I said, there'll be 30 multiple choice. And what I always do is I try to provide, possible short answers. And because I like games a lot, I always play a little game with you guys. So these are the 11, you'll have 4. These are the 11 possible short answers. And let me explain short answers the way I do short answers. I want you to convey to me that you answer the question. So sometimes, it may be like I bullet point stuff. You know, sometimes it might be you write a paragraph. Sometimes it might be you make a damn diagram and label stuff, you know. I'm not, you know, I don't care so much about the form of the answer. I care that you convey to me that you understand what the hell you're talking about, yes? So I use I call it like positive grading out of that. So instead of you, and I know this is just semantics, but instead of you missing 2 points, I say, well, you earned, 5.5 out of 7.5, right? Does that make you feel better? Like, you are, wow, the students come up here, why did I get 5.5? Well, because you did great. You ordered, 5.5. So I grade those so be thorough, but also stay on topic, right? Don't write everything you know about MIS in question 1. Make sure you're writing what you know about that area, okay? And if a diagram helps, great, make a diagram. Bullet points help, make a bullet point, okay? So here are the possible short answers. The 6 functions that are in information systems. Please list them, describe them, provide an example of each. So that was capture, transmit, store, retrieve, manipulate, display. So when I say an example of each, like we gave several examples, like capture would be a keyboard or something to that effect. What are the 5 components in the 5-component framework? Please list them, describe each, and provide an example of each. Why is it symmetrical? We talked about that today. Explain how system process can be transferred from low tech to high tech. That's moving work from the human side to the computer side. What is the most difficult component to change and why? That is you, that is the person. Let's briefly describe, for example, each of the characteristics of good information. We just talked about that today. Explain the types of tasks that are suited for computers and those that are better suited for people. Why? Give some examples. Briefly explain Moore's law and its impact. Explain the difference in the various levels of content management, include functionality that is commonly associated with these levels. What is the difference between synchronous and asynchronous communication systems? Provide an example of each and advantage and disadvantage of each. Email is a wonderful communication tool which has both benefits and issues. Describe some of the benefits it provides as well as some of the issues it causes. What are 3 types of organizational decisions according to your text? Provide an example of how information systems are used to support decisions at each level. Describe an example of an organization that used information systems to create a competitive advantage, and how did it create that competitive advantage? By product or process, and how? Explain in detail quarters 4 competitive strategies. Give an example for an organization that uses the strategy. How can IS be used to support these strategies? All right, so those are the 11 possible short answers. Now, I will let you, and I was going to make a poll everywhere, but I did not. I will let you lock in one as a group, and I will let you mix one, eliminate one. You know what I'm saying? So, but then the other ones are mine. So you can lock in one, and then you can say one, and you don't have to play my game. You can just leave. So let's talk about locking in one. Who wants to nominate a question to be locked in that guaranteed it will be on the exam? This is one of the 4. Katie?
I would have for 7, the difference between synchronous and asynchronous.
Okay, that's fine. Marie supports that, yes? Okay. All right, so 7 is locked in. Now which one would you like to eliminate? Which one? I would suspect 10 and 11 will probably be on your list because we didn't spend as much time in chapter 3. You got, so you're saying 10 and 11? 10 or 11? It's not both. Can't do both. No, that's not the game. Change the rules of the game. Ricardo, which one do you nominate?
I love the number.
11, you said? Okay. So 11's got to go, according to Ricardo. Yep. So, is it consensus of the group? All right, so 11 will not be on the exam, 7 will be, and 3 of the others, okay? And remember, your chapter 2 quiz is due, and that's probably good. I wanted to make it due before the exam. I know it sounds like you have a lot coming up, but it's due tomorrow at midnight. Okay. So as you study for this exam, you know, that quiz will help you. Taking that quiz, you take it 7 times and keep your highest grade. So, you know, it shouldn't be, should be well on it, right? It's open book, open nose. All right, so I'll see you Wednesday. Have a great day.
Yeah.